All right, so as you guys know, we are starting into a new set of waters here, and that is the reopening of the restaurant and businesses around America. Many states are starting the first initial steps on how to get started or back into business on a day in, day out basis. My name is Paul Barron, and this is the Barron Report. We're going to cover today the state of Georgia. We're going to talk to Bo Peabody, who is the co-founder and executive chairman of Seated, but was also heavily involved in the task force to reopen the state of Georgia. Great to have you on the show, Bo.
Thanks very much, Paul. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So let's go into a little bit about the state of Georgia, obviously your involvement in the task force. Tell me a little bit about what you guys went through to kind of come up with the plan. What was the process for initiating that?
Well, it was pretty rushed, as you can imagine. I think Governor Kemp, announced it last Monday night, two Mondays ago. About 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, at 9 o'clock, we were, naming the group. And then at 9 a.m. the next morning, there was 45 of us on a Zoom call talking about what was reasonable to expect from restaurants in terms of the measures they could take.
Yeah. In terms of some of the elements, because I want to talk about those specifically, as we see more and more states opening up, it seems like many will be looking to adopt some of these initial and early on measurements. What were some of the key things that you felt were truly kind of the cornerstone of the program on reopening?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that food safety is something that restaurants have always practiced and are good at. And a lot of these restaurants have been open for pickup and delivery throughout the crisis, and there's no evidence to suggest that anyone is, getting the virus from food through pickup and delivery. So it's really about humans and figuring out how to run a restaurant which is a small retail space with a lot of humans. Now, I would argue that I've been to some liquor stores, some convenience stores, even some small grocery stores where, I'm not sure I felt any more safe there than I would in a restaurant. Right. But the key is really the table spacing and making sure that people aren't congregating for wait times. So using some sort of tech system to make sure that people are waiting outside, doing as much reservations as you can so people are arriving near when their table will be ready. And then no reusable menus, trying to use sort of chalkboard style menus or digital menus that are cued by a QR code on your phone, if you have access to that technology. Not having a separate entrance and exit is really helpful if you can do that in your restaurant. And then some of the stuff we've all can imagine, disposable tableware, servers wearing masks, limiting the amount of times that people have to touch a food item. So considering having guests pick up their own food, even in a fine dining restaurant at a counter. And I think what I encouraged operators to do is, make it fun, make it so that it's a bit of a different experience. And, we all know that diners love to be close to chefs and, so let them get that feeling of being part of the reopening, not a victim of it.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at the operators, obviously you guys had some conversations with operators there in the state of Georgia. What type of feedback were you getting in terms of their expectations of what they thought would be consumer adoption of this early reopening plan?
I think it's gone pretty much to expectation. I don't think, first of all, a lot of operators aren't open. And so, you've got some of the bigger casual dining restaurants, the Bloomin' brand restaurants, Outback Steakhouse, those are open. But a lot of them aren't. And I think the response from consumers has sort of been as expected. I've been saying there's going to be sort of a continuum. You have a lot of people who are comfortable going out, and they're going to go out early when the restaurants are getting the hang of it. And then as we move, up the continuum, the people who felt less comfortable in the beginning will start to feel more comfortable, and hopefully they'll be going out as the restaurants are getting better at executing on these types of measures. But in general, I don't think nobody was surprised by too much or too little demand. I do think the one thing that I heard was that if you were in the pickup and delivery business for the last 8 weeks or 6 weeks, or depending on what state you've been in, your pickup and delivery business actually increased as a result of being open. So that could be a short-lived thing, but just the fact that your doors are open, that there's been that press has increased the business on pickup and delivery.
So we've seen and we've talked to a few operators here in a few states that have started this initial reopening process. I had a chance to talk to a couple in Tennessee last night, and actually was a little surprised to hear that the consumer acceptance and uptake has been fairly soft. In their particular case, they're looking at about a 10% capacity in a restaurant. Were there any discussions in your strategies and with the task force about where and what you would look or how an operator would even kind of respond to a very soft situation for reopening if they couldn't get enough patrons in?
Yeah, I mean, people, the restaurant economics are based on being able to fill your restaurant at least on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night, or Sunday brunch, depending on your business. So 10%, 25%, even 50%, it's really difficult. And what I've been saying is that unless pickup and delivery was 25% of your business pre-COVID, you're going to have a really hard time reopening the restaurant until some of these capacity restrictions are eased. Restaurants that always had pickup and delivery as a big part of their business, they still do, and they can reopen, and they have staff around, and they have enough cooks to service any number of people that might come and sit in the dining room. So a lot of it depends on the style of restaurant that you had pre-COVID. If it was a restaurant that is a bit more casual, depends on delivery and pickup a bit more than than most full service restaurants, then I think you can open at pretty much any capacity, and being open helps your pickup and delivery business either way.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's look at some predictions here, kind of what your thoughts are. Obviously, you've been in the industry for quite some time, so you've seen kind of this whole process. Your company's Seated. You guys are doing demand generation for table, essentially kind of table monetization for restaurants. What are your thoughts on how this is going to play out over the next year? Do you feel like we're just going to see this 6 months down the road, we'll see a light come on and maybe that is when it hits, or are there any predictions you can provide to us?
Yeah, so Seated has always been about dine-in. We are a restaurant-first platform, meaning we focus on what our restaurants need to do to be successful. They're all going to be in the pickup and delivery business more than they were. And so we are launching next week the ability to order pickup and delivery through Seated. And so our rewards platform, which is what makes us unique and why consumers love to use us, you'll be allowed to get Seated rewards at certain restaurants that are offering them for pickup and delivery. And the reason we're doing that, and this gets to your question, is that we think this is going to be a year of things being just a little bit different. And it'll depend on the city you're in and the demographic of your audience, but I don't think things are just going to go back to normal. I would be surprised that if a year from now we're not feeling more normal. But I think it's going to take time, and in some cities it'll take 3 or 4 months. In other cities it'll take 10 or 11 months. But it's not gonna be a grand reopening, as they say.
Right. Yeah, and I think I would have to agree with that. Is that I think the softness and the strategies moving forward are really going to kind of reset the stage. With that being the case, when you look at an operator that maybe they're a casual dining operation, they start developing, whether it's, we talked to a brand leader here in South Florida that was doing virtual brands within his casual dining restaurant alongside adjacent his current menu. So they were looking at really kind of keeping that as a long-term strategy. If you look at takeout, curbside, to go, a lot of these other aspects that are being introduced or either amped up in a lot of these operations. Do you feel like this could be a very pivotal time in our industry that shifts us more to truly less dining in? And I'm talking beyond a year out here.
Yeah, I would be surprised. I think restaurants are, vital threads in our social fabric. Restaurant spend has outpaced grocery spend for the last 3 years. I certainly, look, delivery was growing as a percentage anyway. I certainly think there'll be tailwinds there that will persist. But I think that people are going to go back to being in restaurants once they feel safe.
Yeah.
And that's largely going to be driven by drugs, whether they be, a vaccine, which is ultimately the answer, or therapeutics that are proven to be impactful. So I doubt there will be any difference in the curve that we were already on.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a short term. Look, one thing you have to layer in here is what's happening in the economy.
Sure.
How much of the soft demand that people experienced in Tennessee over the last couple nights was from people feeling unsafe versus
or just
people
out of work
and sitting in a house that's more full of groceries than it's ever been. So, there's going to be a couple of factors going on here. I think once the weather improves in some of the larger dining cities, you're going to start to see some people, I think, going out more as a result of that. So there's a lot of factors here. The things that I really think will stick are some of the small things like, contactless payments.
Right.
That's something that we should have been doing a long time ago. They're doing it in Europe. They're doing it in Asia. That's going to happen in the next 3 months, and I doubt we're ever going to go back.
Sure.
And that would be great. A good thing for the industry. Getting rid of menus, I think that's something we need to do at some point, and having the menu appear on your phone or so I think there'll be some interesting technology things that shift for good.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm working with our local community here, and they've already started kind of this reopening task force, and met with a few operators this week, and a lot of them were moving in that direction towards contactless, obviously the QR code aspect of it. One thing that came up that I was intrigued with is there's an economic group here that I work with that is studying kind of this whole impact of the current jobless scenario that we're faced with, which is now over 20% here in the U.S. If that holds and we don't see the correction, many experts are seeing, when you look at the compounded rate of the loss of restaurants that we had, of just that aren't going to reopen, now added with the jobless rate that we're going to see over the next 12 months, maybe over the next 2 or 3 years, that we could see a shrinkage in the industry by a considerable amount. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's likely to happen. Every day you read about restaurants that, are closing, and the narrative is sort of they were thinking about closing and their lease was up and now they're just going to close.
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to be the first wave, or restaurants that were sort of, in that
kind of on the bubble.
Yeah, on the bubble anyway, and now are just going to take this opportunity to close. But one of the things that has always been true is that restaurants, people love to open restaurants.
Yep.
I doubt if we will see a fundamental change in the number of restaurants that we have in this country in the long term. Could it be different for a year? Definitely. But again, this time next year, I would be surprised if we're not looking at, a more normal cadence of openings and closings, which is sort of a part of the business. And I think that if some of these measures that we're talking about, could make restaurants more profitable, shorter, more easy to execute menus that have higher profit margin items is something that everyone's talking about for reopening. A lot of that stuff could stick. And I think there's a real chance that restaurants become a more profitable business as a result of this. if we adopt some of these things that really make sense for the business, and
Right.
keep them throughout the comeback and beyond.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, I love what you guys are doing. Thanks so much for stopping in today. I'm going to keep a close eye on Georgia. I think they are definitely one to watch right now as we see the reopening strategies begin. Obviously, we're having that here in Florida too. So
Georgia's really a dress rehearsal for the entire country.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks a lot for stopping in, Bo.
Okay, take care.
All right, so for all of you listening in over on Spotify or maybe on iTunes, make sure and drop us a review. That's how we get kind of feedback from you, our audience, and it's also how we understand what you love and what you don't love here on the Barron Report. If you have a great idea for a show, make sure and just shoot us an email to producer@foodabletv.com. You can also hit me up on Twitter @Paul Barron. That's the best way to reach out to me. Even the haters, go ahead. I love to hear that too. It's good to have you guys today. We'll catch you next time right here on the Barron Report.